going to take me a minute here. So just procedural. If you have a cell phone, please make sure it's on silent. I'm Bruce Holman, and I want to welcome you to this celebration of the remarkable life of my dear friend, Gordon Millar. That's the way you pronounce it, right, Pat? There's many ways to pronounce Millar, all kinds of things. But I always called him Gordon Millar. Gordon's life, to me, is best captured by the Kenneth Grahame Wind in the Willows quote, and if I can take a bit of license with it, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, half so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats and playing music, collecting apple peelers, acting in a play or an opera, building a set, celebrating Robert Burns, designing an airplane, predicting the weather, tutoring math, telling stories, living on the beach, raising a family, and loving Patricia. The apple peelers, right? So I think we all want to give our thanks to Michael Monteleone. Michael, wave your hand so everybody can, yeah. For putting together this just amazing photo montage. And to Tyrone Heed for playing the bagpipes. Thank you. Hearing the bagpipes just reminded me, at one point, Gordon, my dad, my sister, and I traveled in Scotland. My dad and mom had traveled in Scotland a number of times. My mom's family was from Scotland, so I have deep Scottish roots. And he had wanted to go back and visit some of the places that they had visited before my mom had died. And so Gordon joined us, and he was sort of the wonderful guide to Scotland. You couldn't ask for a better guide to Scotland. And one evening, we were staying at Culloden, which is the site of the last great battle for Scottish independence during the Jacobean Rebellion of 1745, and it was my dad's birthday. And so we were sitting out on the lawn, sort of figuring, okay, how are we going to celebrate this birthday? And up walks a piper. Gordon had arranged for a piper to come and play for my dad on his birthday in Scotland at Culloden. I mean, that's the type of guy Gordon was. And so, give me a minute. I also want to acknowledge, and this is something Gordon and I talked a lot about, and he was very, very passionate about this. I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Shwabop's native people of Vashon Island. That tradition goes back millennia, and this was their land before European and American settlers came and took it from them. I also want to remember a time in the mid-90s when Gordon and I were again going to travel in Scotland. And we met in London, and we went down to Bradford, where Rory, Gordon's son, was living on a canal boat. And it was just a fascinating trip. His oldest son, Sean, joined us, and we took about a week to travel from Bradford down to Bath on the canals, on a canal boat. And Gordon was in his element. He was captain of the boat, as he always was, but he was opening the locks, he was ushering us in, we were stopping for lunch at pubs. I mean, it was just a wonderful journey, and he just reveled in having Rory and Sean with him, and it was just a very touching sort of experience. And so, Rory, I'd like you to come up and say a few words about your dad.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Dad's friendships were very important to him, so it means a great deal to us that you are here to remember him. I was 4 when we moved to Vashon, and it was where Dad found his home. Vashon has all the things that matter to him most, including sailing, beaches, theater, most importantly, being part of this small community. The thing I most remember about him was his sense of humor. often bordering on the ridiculous. I had lots of examples to give you, but the ones I remember aren't appropriate for today, so you'll have your own that you can fill in there. Casey and I shared a love of sailing with Dad, and I have very happy memories of the vacations that we had in the San Juan Islands. Despite his penchant for sailing in the nude, which is deeply embarrassing for us as teenagers. The little red boat that you saw in the slideshow, Dad built for us when we were children, and we had many adventures in that boat. We learned to sail in that boat, and we had a great time. I was very happy that he found such contentment with Patricia. Knowing this gave me great comfort. Not being able to see him as much because we lived in England. They made each other laugh and had a very long, loving relationship and connection. And she even tolerated all of his eccentric collections, which he probably deserves an award for. With Dad's sense of the dramatic, he would have loved being the lead of this show today, with his favorite people here to applaud. So this is a poem that my granny sent Dad and Patricia found, and it's "Oh, the Comfort" by George Eliot. Oh, the comfort, the inexpressible comfort, of feeling safe with a person, having neither to weigh thought nor measure words, but to pour them all out, just as they are, chafing grain together, knowing that a faithful hand will take and sift them, keep what is worth keeping, and then, with a breath of kindness, blow the rest away.
Thank you, Rory. It's really good to see you and Casey here today. Thank you. Thanks for coming. If you look in your program, there's a poem called Sea Fever. And it's sort of, it captures, and I think Pat, when she chose that, because it captures Gordon so well. And the first couple lines and the last line are, to me, really, really sort of embody how I think of Gordon. It reads, I must go down to the seas again, to the lonely sea in the sky. And all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by. And quiet sleep and a sweet dream when the long trip's over. Well, the long trick is over for Gordon, but he's not gone in our hearts, and he's not gone in our experiences that we had with him. And that's such an appropriate poem because, to me, I knew Gordon mostly as a sailor. I knew other parts of his life as well, but it really was Gordon as a sailor where I first met him when he first came to the island in 1977. And we had that almost 50-year relationship built around boats. And as I got to know Gordon, I got to know what an extraordinary sailor he was. He grew up sailing Etchells in Edinburgh. He sailed in Cowles Week on the Duke of Edinburgh's boat, which happened to be captained by Uffe Fox, the very famous Danish boat designer. He sailed, when he came to Vashon, he sailed on Paul Munir's Ranger 29 for a while. He sailed with Carl Fredrickson. And at the end of his racing career, he sailed with Pete Clark on Cheetah. And of course, it was 1985 Swiss Shore, the only Vashon boat to ever win the Swiss Shore Classic. First overall, Pete Clark and Cheetah. And Gordon and I and a bunch of ragtag others were part of that crew. And it was just a magnificent race. So thank you, Pete. And then, of course, Rampant. Gordon bought Rampant, a Newport 27, and he loved that boat. He was a magnificent sailor. He would wipe out the competition. Newport 27s are known for the light air capacities, and in the summer there's usually light air in Quartermaster Harbor, and so he would just smoke the rest of us, and we'd sit there sort of, Gordon, how do you do that? But he did. And he did it because, if I can use a quote from Webb Childs, Around the World sailor, he said, "A sailor is an artist whose medium is the wind." And if you think of it that way, I mean, Gordon was an artist on many levels. He was an artist in his collections. He was an artist in the way he lived life. He was a musician, as an artist as a musician. But to me, his greatest artistry was watching him sail a sailboat. And of course, Gordon was a musician, but much more than a musician. He was an entertainer. And so let me introduce Carter Castle, and Carter's going to talk about a bit about Gordon and his music on Vashon. Thank you, Carter.
I first met Gordon at a Halloween party. He and his partner were dressed as ghouls, and I thought, this is kind of interesting. He's this guy with this black top hat and all these ashes all over his face, and I don't know how the conversation arose, but we were introducing ourselves, and he said, "I'm 62, and everything's in perfect working order." I'll never forget that, because it spoke to me about who he was, and I thought, this guy is really something. I knew Gordon on stage quite a lot with musicians, and he was in a number of bands throughout time I'd known him on the island. He was a guest performer when I did the shows at the Blue Heron. I embarrassed myself terribly by talking about how he was a director of the Burns dinner, and I said it was so I said George Burns instead of Robert Burns. He looked at me with askance, of course, and I had to kind of weasel my way out of that one. But I dearly loved Gordon. He would play the penny whistle. He would break out in song, and I bet everybody here knows that part about him. At any time, he would just throw himself behind it and give all the passion and grace that he had within him. I remember on Lummi Island, one of my finest memories is of him. I'd get up in the dawn, in the early morning, and he'd be on his deck playing this penny whistle. It's just so moving. I could never get over it. Anyway, I'm going to do a short song here that I knew he really loved, and we shared. I played it. I mean, he sang, and I played the song at Blue Heron once, and I'll try to get myself organized here and do that song for you. It's called "The Water is Wide." The water is wide, but I can't cross over. It's out of my wings to fly. Build me a boat that can carry two, and both shall row. My love and I sea. It's as deep can be, but not as deep as the love I'm in. And on ahead, I sink or swim. I lean my back up against an oak, thinking it was a trusty tree, but first it bent and then it broke, just like my own false love to me. The water is wide, but I can't cross over. It's as deep can be, but not as deep as the love I'm in. And on ahead, I sink or swim. That's from Gordon's home.
Thank you, Carter. Thank you, Carter. That was wonderful. Gordon also was an actor, as we all know. On the stage and off the stage, he was always acting. It seemed like it was the nature of who Gordon was. He was kind of the consummate actor, because I remember one time there was a play at the Blue Heron, and when in the old Blue Heron, when there was a play, I mean, it was a space about a third the size of this space, and you were right up against the stage. I mean, the back wall was, within touching distance. And so it made for a very intimate kind of theater that's difficult to find on Vashon these days. But this was a play. I couldn't even remember the name of the play, and I couldn't find it, and sort of trying to research it. But it was a play, and Gordon and another actor were playing a couple old geezers, so something Gordon could do very well. And at the end of the scene, came to the end of the scene, and the last line, the other actor had forgotten his lines, and so there was just a silence. And so Gordon, being the actor he was, he sort of just leaned back and he stroked his chin, he nodded his head, and then the stage crew was astute enough to sort of bring down the lights, and boom, the scene was over. After the play, I can't tell you how many people came up to Gordon and said, "That was the most magnificent ending of a scene I've ever seen." and so it was just that sort of ability to be in the moment as an actor, and that really defined him. And Rich Wiley is going to talk a bit about Gordon and Drama Doc and his life on the stage. So thank you, Rich. I think it was.
Yeah.
I do think it was.
It's a great play written by a Canadian woman. I'm going to take this off if you don't mind. My glasses are all fogged up and I can't read my notes. Well, I'm going to talk about my partner in crime, who would take any stage that was offered on Vashon. Drama Doc never had its own performance space, so we were always shifting and using O-Space or the old Blue Heron, and of course now VCA, but any space that was available, even Ober Park. And I first got to know Gordon when he moved to the island in 1976. We commuted to Boeing together, both engineers. And I think I took the morning boat with him. He worked somewhere else far away and had to spend the time to get back there. Oh, by the way, I have Sue in the audience to give me this. So don't worry, we're not going to go over 7 minutes. Maybe 10, okay. Dramadoc was offering in 1978 a rather morbid, dull, dreary play called Gaslight. And I auditioned, and another woman auditioned, Janice Boschert. She was actually one of the founders of Dramadoc. And miraculously, I got a part from reading for Laurel Watt, who was the director, but we couldn't find an investigator. Ruff was his name, Inspector Ruff. And so I'd been listening to Gordon for 2 years on that morning commute. So I said to him, there's a play we're doing, and you would be perfect for Inspector Ruff. And he thought about that for a while. So I set him up with a meeting with the director, and she hired him on the spot. Now, that's as far as I've taken Gordon. After that, he just was on his own. I want to read a review of this play by Bill Spidell. He and his wife Shirley were big supporters of Dramadoc in the early days, and he always wrote our reviews. And he wasn't very impressed with my performance, I hate to say. Prior to that arrival, the first act is almost entirely dedicated to the continuing emotional destruction of one Bella Manningham, played by Janice Boschert, by her sadistically inclined husband, played by Rich Wiley. Bingo. It quickly becomes evident that he's been at this endeavor for some time before the play opens. And at the start of the festivities, his side is surely winning. Along about the time your nerves can't take the torture any longer, Gordon Millar, playing Detective Ruff, comes waltzing in to steal the show for the balance of the evening's entertainment. He's replete with a Scottish accent that fits the role and is one he brought with him to Vashon. And he encourages Bella to drink scotch. It will soothe her nerves. But anyway, that wasn't too encouraging for me. But there were a couple of funny stories to go with this production. There were only 5 characters, 3 major ones, the Manninghams, and Inspector Ruff. And Bella went ahead and forgot about 5 pages of the script. And if you think about flop sweats, they were there and because she was going mad, all she did to help us out was run around the stage wringing her hands. But Gordon finally figured it out, got us back on track, and we finished that show. We added a matinee performance of that particular show and invited the nursing home and the crew that runs it to come to that show free of charge. Now, one would have thought a show that dark would not be good for the nursing home. And I think they were right. In the second act, one of the residents came down the aisle and onto the stage and asked Gordon for directions to the bathroom. Well, Gordon seized the moment, brought the lights up, took her to the door that would get her to the bathroom up the stairs. And the play went on. There weren't too many in the audience for that one because it wasn't publicized very well. But that's sort of what he had to do to trial. That was his trial by fire. And there was no going back. Gordon is supremely talented. Okay. In fact, as well as memorizing the lines to a three-person play, which is daunting, he was a set builder, he was a set installer, a set painter. We called him poster boy for Drama Doc because he would take at least 25 posters around and place them in businesses so we'd get a few people walking in to see the show. He would even volunteer to run lines with people that were having trouble because as we learned, if you forget your lines, you leave everybody in a mess. So, I mean, he was very caring to bring lesser actors up to par to put on a show. He loved the fact that Drama Doc used all local people in their shows, except for two exceptions that I can think of. He also served on the Drama Doc board. You saw the sash he was wearing as a Drama Doc emeritus member. We couldn't get him off the board. We finally had to give him the emeritus title and a sash. Among my favorites that Gordon was in, two iterations of The Foreigner by Larry Shue in 2000 and 2014. He was Sergeant Froggy Lesueur. Twelfth Night, he was Malvolio. Something's Afoot, Colonel Gilweather. Into the Woods, he was Cinderella's grandpa, of course. Inspecting Carol, we did twice. With Patricia Kelly, his wife, they were Sidney Carlton and Dorothy Tree Hapgood. That show was written by Daniel Sullivan and the cast of Seattle Repertory Theater. And if you get a chance to see that, it's one of the funniest shows I've ever seen. In The Wizard of Oz, he was the wizard. Anything Goes, he was Lord Evelyn Oakley. In Honk, he was Drake. In Christmas Carol, he played the part of Marley. In Red Ranger Came Calling, he was an elf. And of course, Pirates of Penzance, he did in 2011 at the age of 75, and I don't know how he did it. You have to be very spry, lots of dancing, lots of fun times. And of course, he was in No Sex, Please, We're British. He appeared in several Vashon operas as well, once as a dead body. He's even had a play written for him by Jeannie Okamoto, Turn the Corner, George. Gordon appeared in upwards of 40 productions. When you consider that that's 6 to 8 weeks of prep and 3 weeks afterwards for productions, that's a lot of time he spent doing theater, and I just loved being there with him. You've had a wonderful run, old man. Sorry. I'm sure you are with us today, but wherever you are, break a leg.
Thank you, Rich. Let me set the scene for you a little bit. Flodagary. Flodagary is the home of Flora MacDonald. It sits on the very northwest tip of the Isle of Skye. And on a trip to Scotland with my father and my sister and Gordon and I, my dad had always wanted to see Flodagary because Flora MacDonald was the hero of Scotland. She is a woman who, after the defeat at Culloden and Bonnie Prince Charlie was on the run from the English, she disguised him as a woman, dressed him up in her clothes, rowed him out to a waiting French warship that then spirited him away to France and saved his life, basically. So here we are at Flora MacDonald's house in the Isle of Skye. If you've never been to the Isle of Skye, it's one of the most spectacular landscapes in the world. And after my dad had gone to bed, Gordon, my sister, and I go down to the pub. There was a pub in the basement. And we walk in, and it was jammed. And here we are in the middle of nowhere at the very tip of Skye, and I think, what is going on? Well, it happened to be a hen and stag party for a local couple. So people from all over Skye had come to celebrate. And there were two Scottish musicians, a woman who was singing and playing the flute, a guy who was playing the guitar. And it was just this very pleasant Celtic music and singing and sort of reveling about this upcoming marriage. And then as the alcohol flowed, and as the music went on, and as the night went on, they began to sing Scottish national songs. And by the end of the night, here's this whole pub banging on the tables, standing with her fist in the air, F England, Scotland forever. And it was just an amazing sort of experience. And I looked over at Gordon, and he was just glowing. He was in his element. And that element carried the Vashon in the Burns Society. And John Burke's going to talk a bit about that.
If I may. I had to bring my notes, and a lot of you realize I very seldom talk from notes. Full disclosure, I spent 15 years at Vashon High School and never wrote out a lesson plan. Yeah, you can't get me now. So there has been a Scottish presence here on Vashon for many, many years. Bruce can probably fill me in on this, but the earliest newspaper article I found was from 1923 for a Burns dinner that they said was going to be the best one yet. So it had to have gone back a couple of years at least before that. So we're over 100 years celebrating Burns. Well, the Pipers Club used to do Burns Supper, and a lot of us went to that, the older people here. And then the Pipers Club became less prevalent, and one year there was not going to be a Burns Supper. So Sterling Hill, some of you remember Sterling, and Gordon and Dan Brown and I were down at the docks, hanging around looking at boats, of course, and he said, well, there's not going to be a Burns Supper. And Gordon says, we can't have that. And Sterling says, no, we can do that. So we decided to do a very, very small get-together at the yacht club. Well, of course, Sterling was a teetotaler, so he wasn't even thinking about anybody drinking there. Gordon and I and Dan had other ideas. But so we did it that year, and then the next year it caught on, And there was a group that kind of coalesced, and it became the Vashon Burns Society, and it's been going now for going on 23 years. But this is just the latest of the groups, and Gordon was our president for the entire time. He was fun to have at a meeting. We didn't, as Celts are wont, we didn't always agree on things, but he did a great job, and he was also the master of ceremonies and had just a wonderful time with the Burns dinner. We did have a Zoom Burns 2 years ago, and last year there was actually a family in Burton that was gracious enough to do the Burns dinner, and 3 of the board, Dan and Jean and I, went to that. So it has been an unbroken tradition, one way or another, for over 100 years here. So Gordon was wonderful, and he twisted my arm. I don't mean to go back on Drama Doc, but he twisted my arm into helping with sets. And whenever he needed, shop stuff, he just called me. And he got me into working on stuff for the Heritage Museum. It was always, Gordon, can you give us a hand on this? Well, the giving us a hand turns into be about 2 or 3 weeks of all your spare time and tools. But I was looking through Burns, and as I said, I don't generally speak from notes, but I found a Burns poem that seems to fit Gordon, and I had to scribble it out. I didn't have a notebook, so I did it on the back of an old French wine barrel. It's an epitaph on my own friend. An honest man here lies at rest, as ere God with his image blessed, the friend of man, the friend of truth, the friend of age and guide of youth. Few hearts like his with virtue warmed, few heads with knowledge so informed. If there's another world, he lives in bliss. If there is none, he made the best of this.
Thank you, John. An amazing 100-year run on Vashon for the Burns Center, over 100 years. Yep. Yep. You've given me a task. So my joy, my love of research. So I will do that. So Gordon was very involved with music, as you've heard from Carter. But the heart of his music was really Celtic music, and starting with sea shanties and then moving into being one of the founders of Geordie's Byre. And he always carried his penny whistle with him and always was ready to break into song at any moment. And so Gene Rickstead, Dan Brown, Steve Amstead are going to play a bit in honor of Gordon.
My love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. Oh, my love is like the melody that's sweetly played in tune. As fair art thou, my bonny lass, so deep in love am I, the seas gang dry, till all the seas gang dry, my love, and rocks melt with the sun, and I will love thee still, my dear, while the sands of life shall run, and fare thee will my only love, and fare thee will a while, and I will come again, my love, though it were 10,000 miles, though it were 10,000 miles, my love, though it were 10,000 miles, and I will come again, my love, though it were 10,000 miles.
All right, thank you. And then there was Patricia. Christmas Eve, 2002, Kevin and Nancy's annual Christmas party in Ellisport, and Gordon and Pat met. They wooed each other long distance from Hawaii and Vashon for a year, and then they began their life together. And their life here on Vashon and on Lummi Island has enriched us all. Pat?
A wise Vashon playwright created dialogue in a play that Gordon and I were fortunate to be cast in several years ago. Friends are the family we choose. We often pondered this phrase, realizing how lucky we were to be blessed with so many friends, especially those on Vashon, Lummi Island, the East Coast, and Great Britain. As I look out in this wonderful sacred space, I see those of you that Gordon worked with, performed with, sailed with, and played with. He considered you his chosen family. On behalf of the family, I would like to thank you for sharing in this celebration of life for my beloved Gordon. As Rory began this tribute with a poem left by his grandmother, Joan Hunter Millar, I would like to end with another that she left for Gordon. Sleep Sweet by Ellen M. Huntington Gates. Sleep sweet within this quiet room, O thou, whoe'er thou art, and let no mournful yesterdays disturb thy peaceful heart, nor let tomorrow mar thy rest with dreams of coming ill. Thy Maker is thy changeless friend, his love surrounds thee still. Forget thyself and all the world, put out each garish light. The stars are shining overhead. Sleep sweet. Good night. Good night.
We all miss him, Pat. We do. When a spirit like Gordon's leaves this world, it leaves a gaping hole for all of us. Gordon, may you move as gracefully and as gently into the next world as you moved in this world. May you move on with fair winds and smooth seas, and with the knowledge that you are loved, that you will always be in our hearts until we too join you in crossing the bar. Now, what I would like to do is have everybody stand up. And I'd like you to join Gordon through the magic of Michael Monteleone's time machine in singing Wild Rover.
This is my friend Gordon Millar, who most of you may have heard about or know, if you're lucky. And Gordon was a creator of many bands on the island over many years, and lead singer, Celtic bands mainly. But he's also head of the George Burns Society, so if you want to get tickets to that, he's the guy to see. Not George!
Robbie Burns.
I knew that was coming. Sorry. Sorry, Robert. And head of Drama Doc. So you've probably seen him on stage many times. And my eternal apologies, Gordon. Here. He's got a great song for you.
Boy, what a hard act to follow, eh? I don't think I can do it on my own. You're going to join me, right? On the chorus. This is an Irish drinking song. Wild Rover, okay? So what's a Scotsman doing singing an Irish song? Who cares? All right. So let's practice with this chorus first. I'll do it, and then I'm going to have you do it back to me. And it's no, nay, never, no, nay, never, no more will I be a wild rover. No, nay, never, no more. Right? Okay, are you ready? And it's no, nay, never, no, nay, never, no more will I be a wild rover. No, nay, never, no more. Great, here we go. I've been the wild rover for many a year, and I spent all me money on whiskey and beer. But now I'm returning the golden great store, and I never will play the wild rover no more. And it's no, nay, never, no, may never, no more will I play the wild rover. No, nay, never, no more. I went to an alehouse I used to frequent, and I told the landlady my money was spent. I asked her for credit, she answered me nay. Sure, and custom like yours I can get any day. And it's no, nay, never, no, nay, never, no more will I play the wild rover. No, nay, never, no more. I took from my pocket 10 sovereigns bright, and the landlady's eyes opened wide with delight. I've whiskies and wines, all of the best. Sure, the words that I spoke were wholly in jest, and it's no, nay, never, no, nay, never, no more will I play the wild rover. No, nay, never, no more. I'll go home to Patricia, confess what I've done, and hope that she'll pardon this prodigal one. And if she forgives me, as oft times before, then I never will play the wild rover no more, and it's no, may never, no, may never, no more will I play the wild rover, no, may never, no more again, and it's no, may never, no, may never, no more till I play the wild rover. No, may never, no more.
Thank you all. Thank you. Gordon would just revel in knowing that you sang Wild Rover with him one last time. So we're going to adjourn from here. We're going to meet in the reception hall. There'll be an open mic there for anybody that would like to say anything. And thank you all for coming. Casey, Rory, Pat, we love you. Thank you.